The video you are about to see contains clips that are taken from a video recording of a tour guide in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who is giving an introductory history speech about City Hall to a tour group before taking the group to see the inside of City Hall itself. In this video, we will be looking at and analyzing some of this tour guide's nonverbal behaviors, specifically looking closely at her use of 4 nonverbal concepts that are known as beats, emblems, leakage cues, and immediacy behaviors. Let us begin. Beat gestures are gestures used to place emphasis on words. According to McNeil in his 1992 work titled What Gestures Reveal About Thought, a typical gesture is a short and quick flick of the hand in one dimension. For example, up and down, or left and right, or back and forth. The tour guide provides a good example of this while talking about the size of the British Empire.
6 colonies on 5 different continents. It was a global empire.
While saying 5 different continents, the tour guide's hand goes up and makes 3 distinct hand gestures that sync perfectly with the words. These movements in complete sync with her words clearly indicate to the audience that what she just said is something worth noting, and this is a wonderful example of what beat gestures look like. While hand gestures are the most commonly seen form of beat gesture, voice can also serve as a beat gesture. According to Cromer and Swartz in their article, The Effects of Visual Beats on Prosodic Prominence, Acoustic Analyses, Auditory Perception, and Visual Perception, one way speakers can realize word prominence is by using a pitch accent, which they describe as an articulatory beat gesture. An articulatory beat gesture is where the speaker effectively changes the pitch in their tone to mark a word deemed important, and many times it will be accompanied by another beat gesture from the hands or face. Notice how the tour guide's voice pitch changes when she says. Her voice turns briefly monotone while stressing the words she is saying, which indicates we are witnessing here in this moment a hand beat gesture accompanied by a verbal articulatory beat gesture. The next aspect of nonverbal communication that we will analyze from the tour guide is her use of emblems. Ekman and Friesen, in their 1969 work, The Repertoire of Nonverbal Behavior, Categories, Origins, Usage, and Coding, define emblems as nonverbal acts which have a direct verbal translation, or dictionary definition, usually consisting of a word or two, or perhaps a phrase, and usually the definition is well known by members of a group, class, or culture. The tour guide in this video uses a couple of iconic gestures during her speech. Let's take a look at what they are and what may have contributed to their occurrence.
Give people a new place to live, or is it driven by something else?
Here the tour guide rubs her fingers together as if she is holding something desirable while talking about Britain's interest to stay in control over the U.S. colonies. This is the money hand gesture, which is quite easily recognizable in the United States. It is somewhat common to see people jokingly use this gesture with friends to say, "Give me the money," and it is often used without accompaniment from words when produced.
Money is power, okay?
She allows the gesture to speak for itself for a brief second before reiterating its meaning with words. Interestingly, the hand gesture we looked at a minute ago also contains an emblem in it, which is the 5 symbol. When the tour guide raises her hand, she extends all of her fingers openly into a hand position that is clearly meant to represent a number because of the number of fingers visibly outstretched, coinciding with what she is saying verbally. The tour guide could raise this hand gesture with or without words, and we would probably still attribute the meaning number 5 to it because the symbol has been engraved in our minds as meaning the number 5 since childhood. In the same article by Ekman and Friesen, the authors mention that people's use of emblems is typically a conscious and deliberate effort to communicate. They also mention that emblems occur most frequently where verbal exchange is prevented by noise, external circumstance, distance, and by agreement or organic impairment. Based on what Ekman and Friesen have noted, we may be able to attribute the tour guide's use of emblems partially to these conditions. There is not a lot of opportunity for verbal dialogue exchange between the tour guide and the audience because of distance from them and the inability to speak with other people in the audience at a normal voice volume. Based on this, it is arguable that the tour guide is strategically employing the use of emblems at times where she feels the information is especially important and wants to make it easier for people to remember and understand. Now let's take a look at some examples of leakage cues that the tour guide appears to display that may be telltale signs she is uninterested in giving the tour or feeling potentially bored or anxious but is hiding it for the most part. Leakage cues are generally known as nonverbal behaviors that escape efforts to deceive by evading self-censoring or betraying one's thoughts, feelings, or character. Humans try to keep others from knowing exactly what they are feeling by monitoring their bodies and messages they send out, but sometimes unwanted messages seep through the cracks anyway. In their 1969 work titled Nonverbal Leakage and Clues to Deception, Ekman and Friesen identify a form of deception called alter deception, in which one person tries to deceive someone else. The tour guide appears to display some behaviors suggestive of alter deception, which can be seen primarily through her facial expressions, which Ekman and Friesen note as the primary source of leakage cues, but also through other body parts like her feet. While the tour guide generally displays pleasant nonverbal behaviors, while talking about British colonization, she makes and holds an expression that could very well be a leakage cue to her actual current emotions. Let's check it out. Her lips form a downward curve, the cheekbones pull back, and she seems to look off over the audience for a brief second, as if longing to be doing something else. Ekman and Friesen call this a macro expression because it is easily detectable and lasts much longer than a micro expression, which only appears for a split second. The last aspect of nonverbal behavior from the tour guide that we will look at are her immediacy behaviors. Zachary T. Henning describes in his work titled From Barnyards to Learning Communities, Students' Perceptions of Teachers' Immediacy Behaviors, that immediacy behaviors are perceived physical or psychological closenesses between students and teachers. The tour guide is, in a sense, a history teacher. So let's take a look at how she might be perceived by individuals in her tour group based on her immediacy behaviors. Henning states that non-verbally the most important immediacy behavior is eye contact, but that smiling, movement, forward-leaning, and voice volume all strongly contribute as well to how positively a teacher is rated by their students. Teachers who effectively use verbal and nonverbal immediacy behaviors are often better received from their students, and the same principle likely applies here to the tour guide as well. Looking at the tour guide while speaking, one can see that she often does not make eye contact with the tour group, has a pleasant but serious expression, and does not lean forward while sitting on her stool. Because she does not take full advantage of nonverbal immediacy behaviors, the tour guide might be perceived by her tour group as less engaging and effective as an educator, though most definitely knowledgeable about her subject. Albert Mehrabian, in his 1967 work titled Orientation, Behaviors, and Nonverbal Attitude Communication, also notes that the head and physical orientation of a speaker toward the person they are speaking to increases a positive perception of the speaker in the person being addressed. The tour guide is distanced from the entire tour group, and nobody is sitting directly facing her, which may incur lower levels of satisfaction with the speaker in the eyes of the audience. Today we have delved into nonverbal communication through observing and analyzing the nonverbal behavior of a tour guide from Philadelphia's City Hall, and discussed her use of beat gestures, emblem gestures, leakage cues, and immediacy behaviors. We discussed how a speaker's immediacy behaviors can affect how they are perceived by an audience, how the face is a strong culprit of leakage cues, the speaker's intentional use of emblems, and how beat gestures were used to place emphasis on important words and phrases. Hopefully you have learned something new and insightful today about nonverbal communication by watching this film.